It goes without saying, no matter how much you trust a trailer or Steam reviews, even if a game checks every oddly specific box you have, it still can just not be good. Sometimes you boot something up, it looks fine, and then the gameplay is more broken than left alive. Sometimes the game just doesn't work. Thankfully though, Metal Bringer isn't any of that. Part of what is slowly becoming a series of themed roguelike games featuring a hefty pixel filter over chibi-style graphics and loads of customization, Metal Bringer is actually somewhat of a continuation of Alpha Wing Incorporated's previous offering, Samurai Bringer. In fact, even though I haven't played it, it looks like there might be a bit of reuse when it comes to the characters and certain bosses. At least from what I could tell from the trailer. And if I had played it, I imagine it would feature a lot of what I've come to love about Metal Bringer, though hopefully not some of the things I didn't like as much. And yes, that little rug pull a moment ago was completely intentional. Let's see how many people actually watch this before they start furiously typing garbage in the comments section. So, as you've likely gathered, I have no real comparison when it comes to the original Samurai Bringer, which came out in 2022, compared to Metal Bringer, which released in 2025. So don't expect much connecting the dots here, but I am extremely curious about how it plays. That being said, being a roguelike, Metal Bringer is a bit of a nightmare to review in a strictly structured format. If I start with the story, I could sum it up as a Mega Man-esque setup. Androids populating the world in humanity's absence. Much like that series, it has its own terminology. Androids are called laborers and mechs are referred to as arms. Here you play as Surya, who wakes up 1,000 years into the future to a message from her mother explaining that everyone's been put into cryosleep and the laborers have pretty much taken over. You know, and there's also an evil AI thrown in there, acting as the game's central and mostly silent antagonist. Surya inherits a hub where she can basically print out labor bodies and hop between them, meaning she doesn't die permanently when venturing out into the world, and more importantly, gets access to the game's absolutely ridiculous number of weapon types. This acts as the launching point for everything the player does, and it works pretty well. However, the game also features a ton of side lore. All of it's discovered either randomly during runs or by defeating bosses. You can quite literally piece together the full before and after of the current world state, the thoughts and intentions of the laborers and their overlord, and even connections to Surya's family and everything else going on. I'm sure there are plenty of people who got really into Surya and the world that Alpha Wing has created, but being that this is a roguelike, where my brain eventually becomes finely tuned to clear areas as fast and efficiently as possible, and considering how often journals and little bits of lore show up in areas absolutely teeming with enemies, which is most areas all of the time, it was really hard to absorb any of it when I was about 2 seconds away from getting jumped the moment I finished reading. More often than not, it was just more efficient to skip the wall of text and keep my momentum than to stand there, get smacked around, and die for the sake of lore. So anyhow, this is as good a time as any to segue into the gameplay, which I describe in the simplest terms as a sort of 2-button Dynasty Warriors type of delete everything on screen for dopamine energy. It's a 2-button attack system. You equip 2 weapons and you're either button mashing or holding inputs to charge attacks for melee or firing off whatever gun you've got equipped. Simple as that. To make up for that simplicity, Metal Bringer throws an absolutely absurd number of weapons at you, and they're all upgradable through regular use. There are way too many for me to realistically cover here without turning this into a 30-minute breakdown, but I can say that in my playthrough, I barely saw repeats when it came to guns, and only a handful when it came to melee weapons. You've got everything from pistols, machine guns, and rocket launchers, to bows, drones, and gravity cannons. Melee ranges from katanas, broadswords, and sabers, to hammers, beam swords, and spinning blades that look like OSHA violations waiting to happen. A lot of their effectiveness pretty much comes down to personal taste and playstyle, and the more you use a weapon type, the stronger it gets. I haven't gotten into the fact that you can fully customize mechs, called arms, and this is where the game really sinks its hooks in. Arms are absolutely essential for progression. They deal the most damage, they have the most armor, and they are basically your lifeline when it comes to making any real progress in Metal Bringer. But the game absolutely knows this, and it makes the player work for them. You have to retrieve parts out in the field and then gather enough currency to analyze them at a mechanic within the stage. And yeah, that might sound annoying, but it really isn't. It's actually kind of addictive, and it gives you a solid reason to keep pushing through the hundreds of runs you're inevitably going to be doing. On top of that, you've got your standard roguelike modifiers in the form of chips that drop from enemies. These can boost specific weapon types, add effects like burn or freeze, but they're not just for modifying weapons, they also tweak resistances, durations, abilities, vendor discounts, drop rates, and even add entirely new moves or mechanics. Some of them come with huge bonuses, but also nasty trade-offs, and a lot of them can be stacked to become even more powerful. Of course, just like the arms, to actually keep them, you need to find a vendor mid-run and analyze them, or they're gone for good. Once analyzed though, they become permanently available as long as you've got enough OS points to equip them. You can also disable chips, which is great if you don't want to accidentally ruin your build because you picked up something questionable mid-run, which is very possible because these things can absolutely litter the battlefield. As for gameplay negatives, honestly, there's only one really big one: the game's wildly inconsistent difficulty. Sometimes it's an easygoing affair, genuinely fun, sort of smooth and pretty satisfying, and then the very next area just ganks you into infinity. The first time I hit the third area, I genuinely could not tell what was happening. There were so many enemies, so many arms, so many attacks flying at me that it just turned into visual noise and damage numbers. And that's saying something, as this game is already pretty visually noisy. It took me hours to even reach the end of that area, and that meant way more runs than I would have liked. There were definitely moments where it crossed the line from challenging into, okay, this is just kind of unfair. And I don't mean in that Dark Souls get good way, it just wasn't balanced. There are also puzzles scattered throughout the world that reward you when completed, but most of the time the reward is just currency, which means that after a while they start to feel pretty pointless unless you're going for achievements. Which is a shame because I actually liked them at first. They remind me a lot of older Zelda titles, which I'll admit is a very weird sentence to say in a mech-heavy roguelike, but here we are. Visually, the game actually has a lot going for it. The designs are fun, and the arms look pretty cool no matter what ridiculous configuration you slap together, even if they do end up looking like weaponized bulldozers. The chibi style of the labors works surprisingly well too. It leans towards that early PlayStation aesthetic, but the developers have thrown a pixel filter over everything, like they're trying to convince you that this is a Super Nintendo era isometric action game. Which, I mean, I get it, especially with Syria and the labors, it mostly works. But it can be, like I said earlier, a little bit noisy. For me, it was fine. For others, this is absolutely going to look like visual diarrhea. And for all those who didn't like Garrison Archangel and the video I made because of the visual style, yeah, I regret to inform you, we are once again not beating those allegations. This is just as visually noisy. That being said, there is another visual issue, and this one actually bothered me. There's this weird filter over most of the game that washes out what should be deep blacks into this muddy gray brown. And when you go back and watch footage, it really stands out. It just kind of smears everything together. It makes an already busy game look even messier. And honestly, that might be my least favorite thing about Metal Bringer. As for the soundtrack, there were some genuinely good tracks here. The problem is, there just isn't enough of them. For a roguelike, where you're running through the same-ish areas over and over again, it's really important to have enough variety so your brain doesn't start melting. And while nothing here is bad, you're going to hear the same track so many times that you might end up muting the game and just throwing on your own playlist instead, which is never exactly a glowing endorsement. All in all though, I'd say Metal Bringer is exceptional when it comes to gameplay. Visual is up to taste. I'll admit, I grabbed this one on sale for a very polite $17.99 Canadian, so the financial damage was minimal. But even at full price, there's a lot here. The gameplay loop is genuinely satisfying, and it kept pulling me back in run after run, and it was especially fun just using the Steam Deck and playing it on the couch. It's not gonna be for everyone, just again mainly because the visuals are very take it or leave it, and the developer's obsession with layering filters on top of filters doesn't do it any favors. At the end of the day, this gets a humble thumbs up from me. It's messy, chaotic, occasionally unfair, but ridiculously fun if you can't get past the visual clutter. And as usual, I've been Kei-Nova. Thank you for making it all the way to the end of the video. Why not leave a like and a comment below? This year I'm trying to get back into weekly videos and reach 5K subscribers, so if you aren't one already, why not subscribe and join me on this year's journey?